I'm interested in knowing what you think a bold, actionable roadmap for change really looks like, especially considering the actors that we have today with us and that are kind of our captive audience for the afternoon. And also, who do you think needs to be at the table to make these changes happen?
Thank you, Matilda. I think what is critical is, first of all, evidence. And the evidence should be informed by the narratives of the women and girls that are involved. So from the study that we conducted, I always give an example of the women that were studying animal science at the Women's University in Africa, who came from a background where they were not exposed to dealing with large livestock. And they were exposed to large livestock at university level. So they were facing challenges dealing with large livestock as a result of their backgrounds. So it then informed the development of initiatives around dealing with infrastructure to support the effective participation of women in such disciplines. So for me, the most critical thing to start off with is generating evidence and amplifying the voices of women and girls in science programs. Then secondly, earlier people were talking about political will. The political will should be informed by policy transformation. And of course, value-based leadership. We need a leadership that is committed to promoting gender equality and the participation of women in science. So policy transformation, which is not only ticking the boxes, but ensuring that the policies are implemented, they are monitored for their effectiveness, they are also evaluated, and learning is, or lessons are taken and implemented. So the issue around policy transformation, I think, is also very critical. Then, of course, ensuring that the learning and teaching infrastructure is also responsive to the needs and calls for an injection of resources. So the aspect of funding is also quite critical when we want to seriously address issues of women's participation. Staff capacity, I think, is also quite critical. We need to build the capacity of our staff, both teaching and non-teaching staff, to be able to respond to the needs, diverse needs of women and girls in science. So for me, it's quite a number of initiatives, but the last one that I would want to make mention of is dealing with a silo approach to the participation of women and girls in science. We need an ecosystems approach. Earlier, somebody mentioned about the leaking pipeline. So we need to identify where the leaking is taking place and address those. And that requires a multi-stakeholder as well as an ecosystems approach to addressing these issues. So in response to your last question, Matilda, on who should be brought to the table, the ecosystem calls for everyone to be called to the table. It calls for collective responsibility to addressing this particular issue. It calls for the community, the parents, the guardians, the boys, the girls, the women and men at community level. And through our community engagement activities, we can also play a part as universities. Civil society organizations can also reach out to the same communities with gender awareness sessions. Our academic staff, our non-academic or teaching staff have also a role to play in educating the students and also ensuring that they promote gender-responsive pedagogy in their activities with students. The government, from a policy perspective, giving policy direction but also the institutional leadership has got a responsibility to ensure that the institutional policies speak to national policy frameworks and also operationalize those at institutional level. We also have the student, the female student, the male student themselves. They also have a role to play, changing attitudes towards uptake of science programs. So for me, it's a collective responsibility, including industry. Yeah, because it's one thing for universities to provide a conducive environment for the female student to participate in science. And it's another thing after graduation, they go into an industry that does not provide the necessary infrastructure for them to flourish in that particular profession. So it's everybody's responsibility.